Hello and welcome to the Nope Coach podcast. This is episode 344, How to Stop Overthinking. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg. I used to really get wound up by overthinking. I would think, and then I'd overthink, and then I'd overthink my overthinking, and I just didn't get a whole lot done. And I came across some advice a number of years ago, which is so simple, but so easy. And that's what I want to talk about today. But firstly, what made me think to record this episode is I was watching, or should I say rewatching, Modern Family. For those of you who haven't seen the TV show, I enjoyed it. There's 10 or 11 seasons. It's lighthearted. If you're in Australia, it's available on Disney Plus. And I really enjoyed it. I only came across it last year, even though it's obviously over 10 years old, given how many seasons there are. But there's this one scene where there's this couple called Phil and I've forgotten Phil's wife's name. That's bad. I'm going to think of Claire. There we go. I was going to say, I think of it as soon as I hit stop. Phil and Claire, and they're on holiday and they're like jumping from a cliff face into the water. And I don't know about anyone listening to this, but that is not something I personally would choose to do. I've been to a few places and watched people do it, especially once we went on a cruise to Lifu. I might not be pronouncing that right, but in the South Pacific. And we walked this place called the Cliffs of Joken. One of the most beautiful scenes in the world. Incredible. And when we got to the top of the cliffs, a lot of people were like cliff jumping and I was admiring them. But to me, that was a total no. I did not need to overthink this. But in this scene, Phil and Claire decide to go cliff diving, cliff jumping together. And when they get to the edge, Claire's still really keen and feels like, no. And so she's like, let's go. And he's like, okay. And then she jumps and he doesn't. And then you see her drag herself up out of the water and walk all the way back up. And he's like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready this time. Once again, jumps, he doesn't. And then on this third go, she's like, okay, I'll hold your hand. We'll count to 3. We'll do it together. Once again, he doesn't go. And I was like, yeah, I get it. Overthinking. And you may not be overthinking something like cliff diving. So you might be like me and be like, no, that's just a no. It could be something small about, should I make a change to my hair? Then again, that's not necessarily small, depending on who you are. That could be a big decision. Should I start a podcast? Should I write that book? Should I ask that person on a date? Should I, insert thing here? And you're thinking, overthinking, 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 overthinking. Sometimes you even miss your moment. Like it's, people having a discussion about something and you're trying to decide whether you should inject your opinion. And by the time you're like, I'm ready, the topic's already moved on to 3 other things, and it would look weird if you started talking about what you were thinking about. So a tool that I learned a number of years ago that I've used so successfully when I am overthinking something is I ask myself 3 questions. If I was to do this thing, what's the best case scenario? So say, for example, you're wanting to start a podcast, because I'm on a podcast, so it's easy to use as an example. Best case scenario, start this podcast, it goes viral, I have millions of downloads, and now I have a passive income product because my income is purely from my podcast. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? What's the worst case scenario? Start this podcast and nobody listens to it. Absolutely no one. It's like, man, I put all this effort in and it's crickets. What's the most likely scenario? Because chances are the most likely scenario. So for me, starting a podcast, I'd already been in business a number of years. So I was like, most likely scenario, my current clients, current people in my network will listen to it. And, slowly over time, it will grow. And that has been my experience. Another thing, say, writing a book. I published a book 2021. I think it was 2021. Best case scenario, my mind goes to New York Times bestseller, but I've since found out that self-published books can't make the New York Times bestseller list. But best case scenario, it sells millions of copies and I'm like a millionaire. That'd be sweet. Worst case scenario, absolutely nobody buys it. Most likely scenario, once again, people currently in my orbit, people who already follow me, buy it and it gets in the hands of new people and slowly grows. And that has been the experience. And this, now 3 years later, I still get a little royalties check each month, and that's really kind of exciting. So often we know the result of the thing. or the most likely scenario. But we let the thoughts of the worst case scenario stop us. And sometimes the worst case scenario isn't that bad. Like if you start a podcast and nobody listens to it, or if you write a book and nobody reads it, it's disappointing, but it's not that bad. Like it reminds me of that thing. Was it originally from The Hangover? I haven't seen the movie, but there's the clip and there's the gif. It's like, did you die? Cliff diving might be another thing. You might be like, best case scenario, it's the most fun ever. Worst case scenario, I die. Most likely scenario, I will get water up my nose and bathers up my butt and tell myself I'm not going to do it again. For you, that might be enough to go, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. But for me, if the worst case scenario involves potential death, then I don't do it. Or the worst case scenario, say you're going to do some sort of public speaking thing and like be on stage. Worst case scenario, I'm publicly humiliated in front of 1,000 people. Yeah, that might be enough for you to be like, yeah, it's a no from me. So you get to run it through your head. It literally takes moments, and make a decision. And then once you've made the decision, it's time to just gag and go. When I started this podcast, it's been nearly a year. We're in April now. I started it in very early May. So at the end of April, I'll have done my year. I was like, I don't know. I went through this thing because I already had a podcast and it was growing quite well, but I was intrigued by the idea of a solo show. I didn't want to do through the hoops of the jingles and the bells and the whistles and all that sort of stuff. So I just did it. And I have absolutely loved it. It's had ups and downs, but everything has ups and downs. I think sometimes we have this myth of perfection. I do this thing and there's never a downside. Like my daughter is currently obsessed with Taylor Swift, knows all the lyrics to all her songs, follows where she's touring around the world, like absolutely obsessed. And I was watching her concert it's on Disney. This is a plug for Disney Plus, not sponsored, but maybe I should ask for sponsorship. But I was saying, wouldn't it be hard to be her? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, she couldn't just go to the supermarket or walk down the street or go anywhere without being flooded by people and fans and maybe trolls and all sorts of stuff. Like you couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. I think that would be a challenge. And I think sometimes people don't see that. Like, your best case scenario, fame and fortune, also might come with something that you don't want. I was somewhere recently, gotta admit this, but anyway. And someone's like, oh, is that her? I think it is. Oh, it's that YouTuber. And I was like, oh my gosh, they recognize me? No, it was somebody else in the queue. But, like once or twice being recognized, I think would be like cute or fun. But being flooded and not being able to do anything anywhere without troves of people either coming up and interrupting you or following you or taking photos of you or whatever, I think that would be so intrusive and yeah, not my ideal at all. But all this to say, back to the topic at hand, how to stop overthinking. 3 simple questions. What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's the most likely scenario? If you can hold the worst case scenario, like in my case, my thing to myself, if it's not utter humiliation or imminent death or bad damage, I just roll with it. But you get to choose what your parameters are for that. And then once you have decided, yeah, I'm going to do it, just gag and go. One last story before I wrap up. We live in Australia, if you didn't know that already. And in Queensland, so one of our northern states, they have what's called Hollywood on the Gold Coast. So it's where our theme parks are. I imagine they don't measure up to the ones from America. I don't know, haven't been, but am going later in the year. So I'll let you know. I'm very excited. Story for another podcast. But anyway, at this theme park called Dreamworld, they have this ride called the Giant Drop, which, as the name sounds, you sit down, you're strapped in, it lifts you up very, 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 very high, and then you sit there for anywhere between 45 seconds and 65 seconds. How do you know? Because the overthinker in me, while I'm queued up, counted for all the people in front of me, and then it just lets go and just drops you down. I have no interest in this ride. I'm absolutely petrified of heights, but my daughter Xanthi is finally tall enough. And on the day that we go to Dreamworld, my husband, who normally would have ridden with her, had a migraine. And he's like, I can't do it, Suze. And I was like, that's okay. I'll line up with her. We get to the front of the queue and the ride operator says, sure, your daughter can ride, but children must be accompanied by an adult. To which I'm like, why, dude? Like, if she's gonna die, what am I gonna do about it? Like, I don't understand. Must be accompanied by an adult. Anyway, all of this to say, I'm just like, no. And her little face, and she's like, we've been cute for so long. Please, mummy, please, please. So I'm going through this in my head. It's best case scenario. I love this thing. Unlikely, but whatever. Worst case scenario, imminent death. Most likely scenario, I will really not enjoy this. But, and just her face got me over the line, because I said normally, had it just been me, imminent death would have been like, yeah, this is a no. And once again, you might be like, Suzanne, the rides are safe, they're tested, they're tried. But can I tell you, there is a chance. Freak accidents do happen. And I'm talking worst case scenario, you know. Anyway, she convinces me. We go on the ride. We get to the top, and she's like, look, I can see this, and I can see that, and I can see whatever. And I'm up the top of the ride like this. I can't see shit. Like, my eyes are stuck already, and I'm like praying, and I'm not overly religious. Like, anyway. That's what I was to say. We drop. I can't even scream. Like, there's just no air there. I'm like, ugh. And we get to the bottom, and I'm like this, like, I'm shaking. I can still feel it to this day. I can feel the adrenaline. Just thinking about it brings the adrenaline back. And my daughter's like, can we go again? And I'm like, fuck no. I can't even get out of the seat. Like, I'm shaking that much. I can't stand up. Anyway, everyone's off the ride, and there's still me here like this. And the ride operator goes, if you don't get up, ma'am, you'll be going up again. To which my daughter cheers, but you've never seen anyone move so fast. Like, I did not overthink in that situation. I was out of there like Roadrunner. So all this to say, how to stop overthinking. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, most likely scenario. Choose your parameters. When you've chosen, gag and go. But there can be exceptions if you have people relying on you or people dependent on you, and then you get to decide. And then I just thought that was a funny story to wrap up the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy these episodes, please subscribe to my channel if you are watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, if you're listening, because I know a lot of you tune in through Apple, Spotify, etc., if you can just go to YouTube, Suzanne Kohlberg YouTube, you'll find me, and subscribe to my channel. I would so appreciate that. My goal for this year is to reach 1,000 subscribers, and at the time of recording this, I think I'm currently at 320-ish, and I would so appreciate that. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you know somebody who would enjoy listening to it, please just send them through the link. Thanks for joining me. Hope to catch you on the next one. Bye for now.